Well, welcome to the Sunday pod of Alex Garrett Podcasting Productions, and I hope you're doing well. Yes, my next guest, Wayne Vanderwall. First of all, you are the author of the Gospel of St. Nicholas. It's not Christmas time, but man, don't we wish it were right now.
We could all use some good cheer right now for sure.
So I want to bring you on because you have dealt with prisoners. You go to do ministry in the prison. Is that correct?
Yeah, do jail ministry. Uh-huh.
So this might hit home for you. You know, we see this terrible, terrible tragedy, this awful murder of George Floyd. And I've got to ask you then, those in prison, would you say they have had trauma with the cops, or would you say you're working through that with them?
Well, right now, because of the pandemic, haven't been up there in a couple of months. So I don't know what the feel is. This Sunday, tonight is the first, May 31st is the first time we'll get back in the jail after a couple of months. So don't really know what the atmosphere is, what the feel is. So
But
we're
in the
going to
past,
find
have
out.
you, in the past though, you've worked with them to heal some trauma they might have had with their arrest? Is that something that you work through with them?
Not necessarily, just
Okay.
because we have 1 hour on Sunday evenings to minister to them. That's our time slot. I do it through my church, and so there's probably about 30 organizations and churches that are allowed the opportunity to come in and have an hour
Wow.
or two, depending on what they're doing, whether it's Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Al-Anon,
Mm,
all these different programs that are allowed, or other churches, other religions, other beliefs. They're allowed to come in there. And so we just have an hour on Sunday evenings. And so sometimes it ends up into like a Q&A kind of thing where
sure.
they ask us some questions, or they vent, or they
Mm,
bring some stuff up that's like, well, I might have had an outline on what I wanted to get done, but I just felt like God was, brought something serious up, and
mm,
so let's kind of, well, let's deal with that tonight. And but no, haven't had. Yeah, every once in a while, there'll be someone who will make a comment about, police or the guards in Reno, or the sheriff's department. They
mm,
run the jail. And so a sheriff's deputy, or maybe even a judge, or, someone they're not happy with. But thankfully, we, knock on wood,
mm-hmm.
our jail has uh, done a great job as far as training deputies.
That's
And
great. That is
yeah,
great.
yeah. And then, even us as volunteers, we go through pretty thorough training as far as
Good.
how to conduct ourselves and what to watch out for and be careful,
Mm,
because we are in there alone with the inmates. They have the cameras,
wow.
keeping an eye on us, but otherwise we're in there by ourselves with them.
One
And
on one sometimes, or multiple people?
pardon me.
Is it like a one on one conversation sometimes, or is there a group that you pastor to?
Uh, Usually, we have usually a pretty full house. If I'm there by myself, I'm allowed to have 10 inmates.
Okay.
If I have a partner, we're allowed to have 20. And so the 10, if it's me by myself, then it's a little more intimate setting, and it's more like a group setting. And me with my counseling psychology background, I like that, where I can
Mm-hmm.
facilitate conversations a little more, a little better,
Mm,
and get to more people. Um, Getting back to your question, yeah, they come up, but thankfully it doesn't come up that much. It'll be curious to see, after just the last few weeks of several
mm,
instances of police brutality coming up, or situations, race kind of situations coming up,
right.
to see what the atmosphere is.
Well, and I'm glad you
I
kind of
get the
are afraid to use the word police brutality, because I do believe that word itself has been used to demonize all cops, and that's not right either.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the challenge for all of us, regardless of what it is, not to stereotype. There's there's good and bad in every population, and mostly good, to be honest. And there's a lot of great cops out there,
Yep.
and yeah, they have one of the toughest jobs. Back in college and in my 20s, I did security and even thought about becoming an officer at one time. And man, that just really made me appreciate what they go through. Before that, yeah, I was a typical teenager, young person that,
Mm,
if I got a ticket or a parking ticket or speeding ticket or something, 99% of the time I'm a pretty nice guy. But
hmm
that, you know, being in a situation like that when I thought it was unjust, regardless, you know, whether it was or not, I could I could cop an attitude with a cop, and
hmm
and that's what they deal with every day, even good citizens. Like I consider myself a decent citizen the
Sure.
majority of the time, but I know a lot of friends, educated, whatever, but then they get pulled over for a ticket or whatever, or parking ticket, and I don't know if I'm just speaking to myself, if there's other people out there like
Well,
that.
I'm sure there is that. That's just how it react. But I want to ask you then. So you've had instances. I thankfully have not had that instance. I mean, for me, the experience of cops is actually being in lockdown on East 44th Street during UN General United Nations, the General Assembly. I lived a block away from the UN, so we were going through the cops to get back into our apartment when I was a little kid. So that was the really interesting part of that, dealing with the NYPD. But Wayne, you're talking about how actually the sheriffs are great and they're great with the jail that you work in. Um, Let me flip that question around then. Do the prisoners gain sort of a more respect or perspective of what cops have to go through, or what would you say to that?
Yeah, it's I think they do to a certain extent. I think they're able to be aware. That's the tricky thing with our jail ministry, is because it's a volunteer. So I get there, I get to my programs room, and then I call the unit and say, it's me tonight, we'll take 10 guys or 10 gals, and then they send them down. But
Hmm
they volunteer. So in general, the people who are volunteering to come to church, tend to be people who are remorseful, who are reflecting, who are searching, who are,
hmm
taking a step back and reconsidering, what they've done, how they got themselves there, what they can do different. And so, in a way, it's nice. That's who I'm usually dealing with. They're very, very polite, very
They want to
amicable.
find their way to the Lord, and they're finding them
Yeah,
through finding Him through you, which is amazing. Um,
yeah,
right
yeah.
now, right now we're seeing protests across the country. I want to ask that in a minute, but I generally feel like people that are protesting and rioting like this maybe don't have that same pain feeling that an actual prisoner might have. Like they have a lot of pain in the prison, right? That's why they want to heal themselves. So when the average prisoner is looking at this, do you think some of them are saying these kids aren't feeling what I actually feel having been in jail? Like, do you think there's some kind of feeling they get of like, why are these people protesting? And then here I am trying to work on myself.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. Whether you call it's borderline, there's protesting and there's rioting, and
Right,
it's
right,
hard to kind of filter through what's what
sure.
exactly. I think when violence starts happening,
That's not
that's
it. That's
where,
anarchy, as far as I'm concerned, right?
yeah, and that's where it goes to uh, um, not it's not protesting anymore,
Right.
and it's across the line. But I think, again, I don't know how much exposure the guys in jail or the women really have. I know they have TV time,
Mm,
and but a lot of times they're not really in touch unless
okay.
somebody, it's a jail, so it's not a prison. So, there's people come and go, and someone might just be there a few nights, someone might be there just a week or two, some a months, and I've seen someone up there as long as 2 years being there waiting for court stuff
Mm,
and whatever. So, like I was there for Easter, And I walked in, hey, happy Easter, and
Wow.
most of them were like, oh, it's Easter? We didn't even know, and so I don't know really how in tune they are unless, they get a new guy in the unit saying, man, all heck's breaking loose out there. And,
Okay.
this happened and that happened, and then that might stir some stuff up. But in
Mm.
general, I don't think they're really that in tune with what's going on. And then again, if there's one unit with, let's say, 80 guys, I'd say most of them are probably remorseful and
Hmm.
whatever. And those are the people that are going to come to church, but then back in the unit, they'll talk about, yeah, there's some tough guys back, there's a few there for,
So they
temple
see you as a
murder.
counselor, Wayne. That's great.
What's that?
They see you as a counselor, pretty much too.
Yeah, I try to give them an opportunity to come in and kind of share just kind of feel where they're at,
Right.
and give them an opportunity to vent. And yeah, every once in a while they'll bump heads with the guard and
Mm.
whatever. And I have 4 different lessons that I do. I rotate lessons, so I don't do the same lessons,
Okay.
with the same units, because we see them, every couple of months, because there's so
Mm.
many units. And but one of my biggest topics is forgiveness,
Mm.
and that's probably the most powerful topic.
Hmm.
That's where I think the inmates get touched more than anything.
I was gonna
And
say, are tears flowing at certain points of your
oh
ministry?
yeah, yeah, definitely. And you can tell, they come in and, I mention the topic and they're like, oh man, I'm needing a lot of that right now, whether,
Hmm.
needing to forgive somebody. And I kind of open, I'm like, this is an important topic because everybody deals with it,
Mm.
whether it's a parent, a child, a friend, a coworker, a guard, a
Hmm.
judge, you feel wronged, you've been wronged, and you're harboring unforgiveness. So let's deal with that because it's you
And
know
clearly, they're looking for forgiveness from God. That's why they're there, right?
and a lot of them, yeah, they don't think about it. But then, one thing I talk about, I share a little testimony about how, one of my struggles, even after becoming a Christian, was forgiving myself for some things.
Mm.
And that's when I get a lot of head nods, that
Hmm.
yeah, they know they screwed up. They know, they left their wife or girlfriend with the kids, and they're not contributing to the family, and they embarrassed the family, or disappointed their parents. So yeah, they beat themselves up pretty good. We can all be our own worst critic.
Hmm.
And so yeah, so I touch on receiving God's forgiveness, learning how to forgive others, learning how to receive forgiveness from
Mm.
others, and then learning how to forgive ourselves.
Wayne, you're watching this transformation in the jail cell, right? Of these prisoners, of those jailed. And then you turn on the TV, and these people not only aren't remorseful, they're violent, they are burning down precincts and everything. Don't you wish that you could just get out there and touch those lives just as much as you're touching those in the prison walls?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, and yeah, a lot of times, those are depressed areas. It's already hard times, and then here we just went through crazy 2 months,
Hmm.
that affects people being locked in, and who knows how that affected people. I was sitting with a friend this morning, and she does online marketing for wineries,
Okay.
and she said, when the tasting rooms shut down, she figured business was going to be slow. Well, it turned out business just went crazy
Right.
because people were home, people were drinking more than ever.
And
And
to them, that's okay. But in the long scheme of things, this has brought up addictions. This has raised suicide rates. And I think that's what you're getting toward with that
yeah,
commentary there.
abuse, domestic violence, child abuse,
Mm.
addiction, uh, so, what, so going, trying to uh, understand, these riots and what, you know, I mean, those people were already going through, who knows what they were already going through, before the instance happened and the
Right.
tragedy happened or whatever. And, so they might have just been, bubbling ooze of, volcanic,
Mm,
uh, whatever, ready to explode. And
sure.
that just pushed them over, no excuse for it. Uh,
But it led
but
to that. That was a cause of it, an effect of it
yeah,
for sure.
yeah, could be. And yeah, so absolutely wish, we could intervene
Mhm.
somehow before that
Right.
and, try to keep it to protest level and not let it get out of control like it
Wayne.
is. Because then a lot of people are
Mm,
going to be paying consequences. And a lot of
yep.
those people, they're on video and stuff, they're going to be ending up in jail and
Mhm.
having that time to think about what they're going to deal with.
Wayne, you've written about Saint Nicholas, and I'll get on in 1 second. But your ministry was kind of cut off because of COVID, and you're not the only one. I mean, the nationwide there was a total shutdown of religion and worshiping services. Do you think that put us back a lot, not having even worship service available for people in person who don't have the technology to see the online worship?
Yeah, that's a great question. I go to a couple churches, and one's a little more affluent than the other, and the other, really it's near downtown, so they minister to more low socioeconomic uh, things. So yeah, I could tell just you know me jumping online to watch the Sunday services, and you can see the number of people and even some names and stuff, and I could tell some of those people that were a step away from being on the street
Wow.
weren't there. And so uh, I'm sure it affected them somehow, some way. And you just hope that because we were all kind of locked
Right.
in, the
Right.
pastors and the leadership were able to reach out to them and kind of just check in on them and minister to them, financially or spiritually or however they needed it during that time for
Hmm.
sure. Yeah.
Wayne, I'm very glad you're going back tomorrow. That's a huge step. But what's your message for leadership that says, well, we're going to let these riots happen. We're not really going to go after them and try and stop it. But you over there, you can't meet for Christ. You can't meet for God because we still want to put that lockdown on you. What do you say to those leaders that are still saying, hey, people can go out, but you can't?
Yeah, it, it's a mess right now, and these uh, yeah, I can't really speak to because I really don't watch a lot of the news. I
Sure.
peek in just to kind of see the headlines and stuff. So I didn't really realize that they were just kind of letting it go. I saw where I was reading today that President Trump had offered support up in
Mm,
Minnesota, and it didn't sound like it was received. So I don't really understand that. But again, I didn't read. I didn't
mm.
yeah, I don't know a lot of detail. But yeah, it's crazy. Just
And by the way,
like
here's a president that wants to help out, and all he's getting is, crapped on. Now, the tweet itself about shooting looters, I don't condone that. I condemn that 1,000%. But that still doesn't mean if the president calls you up and says, "Hey, we've got resources for you," you can't say no to that in these situations. And maybe they have, and we just don't know it.
yeah, that's what I was saying. I read the headline and some of the story, and so it sounded like he was ready a few
Hmm.
days ago to send whatever support, and it wasn't received. So I don't know. The whole thing's a mess. It's a tragedy. It's sad. And yeah, just the restrictions that they're putting on church, like church Sunday. For here in California, I don't know what
Yeah.
it's like back there.
Yep.
They opened it, but now for 50 people. You can't have more than 50 people. And my one church has 100, and the other church has 2,000.
Yeah.
So basically, they won't really be meeting much.
Mm.
My smaller church will figure something out.
Hmm.
But yeah, the inconsistency, it's just weird. I mean, you can have 200 people walking around Walmart,
Hmm.
and but you can only have 50 people at church. And so yeah, there's definitely some inconsistencies, and And but hopefully, we're in what we call phase two here
Okay.
in Reno, California, and so they just opened that. But yeah, I mean, they open, all the bars and restaurants, and, whatever, and but yet they're capping, the churches at 50, and it's, you
What
know,
is do you think Christianity and the idea of God and God protecting leads a lot of men and women to the police force because they feel like that's what God's called them to do?
that's a good question. Yeah, I think, pretty much most law enforcement have good hearts
Hmm.
and, want to do good. I remember back in my 20s when I was contemplating it, wanting to make a difference. And um, so, and I, at my bigger church, I know there's a sheriff's deputy and several police officers there. And yeah, so I'd love to see more people of faith, uh, in not only law enforcement, but politics
Hmm.
and education and, these things that really affect society.
Well, I
I mean,
was
it's great having, pastors and
mhm.
evangelists and all that, but we need people that are in the trenches.
Because
Uh,
education is where we can stop this kind of revisionist feeling of we have to eradicate everything possible. That's what I feel like they're being taught. Maybe I'm wrong, but based on what we're seeing in these riots, I just feel that's part of the reason why we're not educating them the right way.
yeah, just, I mean, being a citizen. I just read an article earlier that they said 24% of eighth graders taking a
Huh.
civics test, which is basically, being a citizen and knowing about, laws and rules and whatnot. Only 24% could pass a basic civics test for an eighth grader.
Mm,
And so I worked in a middle school for 10 years as a school counselor, and, that just wasn't emphasized,
mm,
what it means to be a good citizen. And I'm big on personal and social responsibility, really self-governing.
right.
Every American should be self-governing. We should be dependent less on the government and more on ourselves and
Mm,
each other, families and friends and, personal and social responsibility. But yeah, exactly what you're saying. It's that test that I just happened to find to come across today just proved that, 3 out of 4 eighth graders don't know what it means to be a good citizen.
mm. Wayne, and you just touched upon it. I mean, if God's in the picture, would he have helped prevent the van burnings that we're seeing with the New York Police Department? Is that what's a key ingredient to why this is happening? Is they don't have God in their lives, possibly?
I think, yeah, for sure. It's a start. I mean, our whole nation, as you know, Alex,
Oh
is,
no.
turned away from faith and God, and it's become, we as Christians have values, we have a moral code to live by, and it's not our standard, it's God's standard that we're trying to live by.
Mm,
And uh, whereas our society has become, the term I think is moral relativism,
hmm.
that morality is relative to the person. And, if, Joe Bob is going to have a different value, have different values than Jim Bob, and Jim Bob's going to have different ones for me. And if we all have our
Right.
own relative moral code, and I think that's part of the problem, and I think that's the huge problem with us shifting from being a nation of faith and especially Judeo-Christian values
Hmm.
to, hey, whatever you believe, that's your deal.
However you feel, you can
Don't,
feel that way.
yeah,
Those types
yeah,
of
don't tell me how to, what to believe in or how to think or what's right or wrong. Your
things.
right and wrong isn't the same as my right or wrong. And so, yeah, so you got all these people, that they have their own thought of right or wrong. Just a little I've seen about the rioting. It's not even about, George
Floyd.
Floyd, or it's all about stealing TVs and whatever. It's just free for all now.
Wayne,
And
when you started your ministry, um, you're very, you speak well, you're great, you get the message across, but did you find trouble early on, like trying to hone the message just right to fit people who are criminals and have committed crimes to lead them to jail. I mean, how much work did it take to actually get through to these prisoners that were in jail, that are in jail?
Again, as I shared earlier, they're very responsive because, again, to come to the church service or Bible study or whatever we're doing that night, the lesson for the night, they know it's church. They know it's going to be about God. They're all from in different places. There's some that come in, they don't know anything. You
Mm-hmm.
know, they didn't grow up with anything. Some might want to just get out of the unit for an hour,
Mm-hmm.
get out of their cell for an hour. And I'm okay with that because they're going to hear the word. As long
Right.
as they're respectful and everything, it's all good. But then we have everyone in between that, they know little or they have it mixed up with some other religions or, all the way up to some guys who can outquote my pastor and biblically and, and everyone in between. So, you go in just kind of keeping that in mind that, really have to keep it basic and personal, try to make it personal so they connect to it and they can relate to it, because some people go in and use all these big words and
Mm-hmm. And you're not
theological.
like that. You just want to give them the actual gospel truth. So I love that.
Yeah,
Which
yeah,
reminds me about your book, The Gospel of Saint Nicholas.
yes.
I think you told me off there you were with a new publisher. Is that correct, or something to that effect?
Yeah, I cleaned it up a little as far as the interior and just made it a little easier reading. Had another editor look at it and kind of made it flow a little more.
Mm,
Uh, Anyone who's read it before probably wouldn't really notice the changes that much. And then just looking at doing a new cover or maybe having a couple different versions of covers out there, just variety. I like variety and
sure.
make it more appealing to people's eyes. So yeah, so I'm gonna kind of working on that, and we'll have another. So this one will be calling a second edition, and so it'll come
Okay.
out. Yeah, we'll have a big book launch and get it out, and just really hoping really take off this coming season.
Mm,
And man, with this crazy year, I man, I can just see people just being hungry. I keep
mm,
That's the interesting thing. I don't know, what your experience was during those 2 months and watching uh, church services online and speakers and this and that. But man, I really found the Christian community, really really embraced. Hey, church isn't a building; it's
right.
all of us.
Right.
And you
We
know,
do Zooms every Sunday on my church, and I'm like,
yeah.
how come we're more, we're so much more talkative on the Zoom than sometimes we are in person, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure there were even more people,
Mm-hmm.
that tuned in from different further places and whatnot. And so, it was just neat to see, people from really all over the world
Mm-hmm.
kind of embracing that and kind of showing that, hey, man, Christianity isn't about buildings, it's about us. And, we need to step up. And, maybe I'm just lucky and I have a lot of people of faith on my Facebook page. But man, I saw so many positive things and prayers and well wishes,
Mm.
reaching out, hey, if anyone needs something. And man, I really saw,
The basic
unfortunately,
thing.
you,
Uh,
you turn on the radio or TV and
mm,
then you see, all the politics happening. And when, here's a crisis happening in America, we should all be together. So watching all these politicians just making things,
yeah.
dividing it more. My experience was online with all these services and people on Facebook and Zoom and all that, where they wasn't affected. To me, the Christian community really became more united
Mm.
in my experience, and even different denominations.
Mm-hmm.
Just saying, look, this is God's bigger than all this, and they were able to.
Life is bigger
So
than
it'll be
all this.
interesting to see what comes out of this. I keep hearing a term, a great awakening, a
I've
great
heard that
awakening,
too.
a great
Yeah.
awakening. So Have you heard that? Is that your
Yeah,
experience
I
too?
have. I've seen that on Twitter tagged a lot. But when you just mentioned about the violence on the screen, and yet when you even walk outside your door, it's totally not what they're saying on TV, and that's the whole mind trick to me. It's like, why am I seeing such a peaceful park when we're supposed to be seeing violence on the streets? Why aren't the media going to peaceful people? And Wayne, why aren't vigils for George Floyd being covered? I mean, this is the question that's bothering me most. Is like you've actually got peaceful memorial for him, and they're just not showing that. And I'm really I can't watch TV sometimes. I get like, am I really seeing this? Is this real life? So but I know that Saint Nick, I'm sure he had some adversity like this. Did he was he during a period of unrest that he rose to the occasion for people?
Yeah, well, one thing you and I talked about a few weeks ago, that Saint Nicholas had lived through a pandemic and or a plague, and that was a huge, significant part of his life. He was probably between 10 and 14 years old when that happened, and he actually lost his parents. His parents died in the plague.
Mm,
So Saint Nicholas or Nicholas, uh, he knows grief, he knows death.
hmm
Here we just hit the 100,000 mark for American deaths uh, uh, over the last couple of months, and here's Saint Nicholas. He was one of those who lost loved ones, and so that's one of the special things about his story is he's so personable, he's so relatable,
hmm
and that changed the course of his life because then his parents were faith-filled people, and so I have that in my book that they had hope. And I think that was the thing, that was the biggest thing with the Christian community online was hope, and
hmm
that's what I saw with Saint Nicholas is and his parents dying is that they know what's ahead for them. They know this
mm
isn't the end of the story. They know they'll see each other again and be with each other again, and that
mm
faith and hope and really made an impact on him. And as hard as it was losing his parents, he had that faith and hope to cling to and get through those hard times and even prepare him for even harder times later because you ask about other situations, and then he lived during a time where at the time Emperor Diocletian, they were under Roman rule, and Diocletian was the emperor of Rome at the time, and he persecuted Christians, including Nicholas, and Nicholas spent 5 years in prison and I'm sure was tortured. I have a big scene of him being tortured and thrown into prison and
mm
spent 5 years in prison. And again, he clung to his faith. That he had that hope and faith that there's something better ahead, regardless of what happens to us here
hmm
and what we're going through. And we have two choices: get bitter or get better.
I love
And
that.
so that's what I saw a lot of online, at least in the communities I was connected to, was I didn't see a lot of negativity. It's like, look, we have this opportunity to kind of step back. The whole world
hmm
has had an opportunity to step back and kind of reevaluate things. What's important in this life. Me working 60 hours a week. Here I'm home with my kids, and this is pretty cool. And maybe I should be working less and
W-
spending more time with the kids because the kids are like clean,
Right.
all the time
That's
because they're
good.
loving me being home so much or whatever. You
Sure.
know, it's different scenarios. So yeah, taking politically people saying using a crisis to get their agenda across. That's a whole other thing. But individuals using this crisis to step back and reflect and reevaluate
And better
what's
ourselves, right? Some have actually taken the
better.
chance to better ourselves.
Exactly.
But
Yeah,
Wayne,
there's
mhm,
so many online classes
yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff. Absolutely, yeah.
Wayne, when you say you're finally home, where do you, on a normal basis, outside of the prison, where do you take the story of Saint Nicholas? Where do you talk about it?
Well, right now I'm not too many places just because
Right.
it's a historical novel that can be read any time of year, and it's kind of neat because during the pandemic, Smashwords. They're an ebook company,
Okay.
and they offered to authors to either do a discount on their books during these 2 months, or offer them free or whatever. So yeah, I went ahead and clicked on free. That if anyone was interested, they could have my book for free during April and May. And it was
That's
neat to see. There, I probably had over 10 people get the book.
Wayne, that is so
Here.
selfless. And it's selfless because you're not looking to do this for money. You're doing this because you want the hearts and minds to change. And I love that.
Exactly, exactly, and get some hope and some joy and
Mm,
some personal, spiritual feeding out of the
sure.
book. And yeah,
Wait.
so I was excited. And every time I got a little
Uh,
email saying, "Hey, someone got your book," I just pray over them and just say, Lord, touch them, teach them, and entertain them, and give them an extra touch, give them some healing or
would
whatever
you
they
ever,
need right now.
would you
Yeah.
recommend that for all authors that they should go on there and really put their work out? Because I've also discussed something called hoarding inspiration, which is kind of what I termed. Because when you hoard it, when you keep it to yourself in a time like this, that's so unhealthy. So, are there other authors that could really share their inspiration as well on Smashwords? Is it some
Yeah,
kind?
yeah. Smashwords opened it up to all authors, and
That's great.
so yeah, there were quite a few, that either reduced the price of their book, or gave it for free. And I knew, mine's kind of off. See, like I said, it can be read any time of year. It's a novel, but the reality is, majority of people are going to want to read it. Uh, Even though there is a lot of Easter stuff, it could just be as much be an Easter book, because it does talk a lot about the resurrection and Christ and all that. And but anyway, I was just excited. Some people, here April, May, went ahead
Mhm.
and got it. And hope they enjoyed it.
Wayne, I gotta ask you. I love the dog barking. That's such a real thing
Sorry.
during this. No, it's okay. It's such a
He's like,
real
I gotta
thing,
go
though.
bathroom, man.
It's such a real thing, but I don't mind it. Um, I but your story, because when you told this to me in December of what was it, 19? Because yeah, we met last October. But when you told me the story of why you clung to Saint Nicholas, that was very moving. So why don't you tell it to those who might be listening to this for the first time?
Okay. Yeah, I'm guessing you're going back to when the story came to me.
Yeah. Yep.
Back in 2008, yeah, I went through divorce. So, hard year, worst year of my life. At the time, my children, my daughter was 11, my son was 9. And it was a rough year, and then anyone who's familiar with divorce, you go from two incomes to one income
Mm,
split. And so when the holidays rolled around, uh, I really wanted to do something different for my kids. I really wanted the meaning of Christmas to be emphasized, not just the material. And I was very disillusioned with all the commercialism of the holiday season at that point too. And so I just wanted to emphasize the true meaning of Christmas, the birth of Christ as
mm-hmm,
our Savior. And so I just started reading more about Christmas history, and then of course Saint Nicholas, and who he was, Santa Claus. And I knew Santa Claus and Saint Nick had a connection, but I didn't really know all. And
mm,
so once I started digging into Saint Nicholas's story, I'm like, holy moly, there's so much rich spiritual teaching and knowledge here. Why don't we? And it's a fascinating story. Why don't we know this? Here he's born to wealthy parents in Rome, and they're Christians. That's unheard of. That's
mm,
crazy. Then the parents die in the plague, and then he inherits everything from them. And then so he's wealthy, and then he feels called by God. They're a Christian family, and then he feels called by God to give it away. And that's how the tradition of his giving spirit
mm,
began. And so yeah, he gave his wealth away, and then became a priest, and then was persecuted, and then uh, traveled with Israel, and then became a bishop of Myra.
mm,
And so here he lived on a coastal, grew up on a coastal city, in a coastal city, and then he was a bishop of another coastal city, and so that's how his name spread
Mm.
to really around the world. I think there's over 3,000 St. Nicholas churches all around the world. But he was on the Mediterranean, and that was the center of the world at that time. That was the
Mm.
Roman Empire. You had Europe, you had the Middle East, you had Africa, you had Asia, and so the Mediterranean was the trading capital of the world. And
Sure.
so he was meeting people from all over the world, and they're all learning about who Nicholas was and his generosity and
Mm.
how he was touching lives, and they were taking stories of him back home all around the world. And so, yeah, so during that season, so that's what I got to share with my children that first Christmas after the divorce was, there's so much, and it was all about him giving, just being a Christ follower and clinging to his faith and hope
Wayne, I
and
feel like the way you're talking about him, you related to him as you wrote the story and did the research. Would that be?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And just of course, financially, things got tougher for me, and then to see him give his wealth away, and it's like, yeah, I really don't need a lot of material wealth, and actually, my kids are 23 and 21 now, and man, my son just I don't hear from him. He's in California, so we don't talk all that much. But he texted me out of the blue. I don't know what was going on with him, but he's like, just Dad, I just want to say thank you for showing us that, materialism and material wealth and having a big house and fancy car and stuff, really isn't important. Just a simple life,
Mm.
keeping life simple and focusing on what's important in life with relationships and
Yeah.
family and friends. And so I don't know where I came from, but man, I just soaked it up as a dad. And I think it all went back to that first Christmas in 2008,
Wow.
and then us talking about it, and that's when I started writing the book, and so yes, a lot of Saint Nick's life as you read it, or a lot of the things I was probably dealing with and struggling with
Hmm.
during it because I wrote it over 7 years.
Wow.
So it was a journey because working for the school district, I just didn't have time as a school psychologist working too much. That I only worked on it during Christmas, Easter, and summer vacations. When I had a block of time to really sit and
But
dig
you got
in.
it done, and that's perseverance. To just go for 7 years and write it. Now, I love the picture of Saint Nick because you say how he went through all these hardships, yet there he is strapping this, the sack of toys on his back and doing it. I feel like that is such a powerful image, saying, "Look where he came from, and look who he became." And I think we can all relate
Yeah,
to that in a sense, can't we?
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And well, Wayne, I love your story. I'm glad that you're back at it. And you had any Zoom conferences about the book or any Zoom interviews about the book yet? Or
Nothing I've coordinated. The season's coming back up, and so yeah, it'll be fun. With this new firm I'm with, that's updating the book. That's going to be part of it is the marketing and what we'll do in the fall,
mm-hmm.
as far as that goes. But not much since last season when I got to hang out with
Sure. Yeah.
you and do some other things. Yeah,
Well,
yeah. So
as a school psychologist, you had mentioned that you had also tried to, gently tell them about God in those sessions or something that you had said something to that effect. Am I right?
yeah, it's a fine line working in public schools and sharing your faith. But get to know kids and you get to know families and who go to church or whatever. But if there's a situation, we can't go in and start evangelizing.
Sure.
But you build relationships with kids and families, and it opens doors to share faith and hear about their faith. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm just interested in people. I love people. I love learning their story. And so if a kid came into my office with a concern or a problem, and we'd talk it out, let them vent, and then when we got to the solution, the problem solving part of it, that's a question I would just ask. I'd say, do you have a faith background, any kind of church background that you
Mm-hmm.
know helps you deal with this kind of problem, and just see what they say and share, and just see if that would open up doors. If regardless of what faith they were,
Hmm.
it opened up doors to just talk about faith and spirituality and
Beautiful.
whatnot. Yeah,
That's awesome. Because I don't know if you miss working in the public schools, but with your endeavor here, I can sense you're not missing it that much. Maybe the kids, but not the abiding by sort of
yeah, miss the kids,
non-religious.
not the politics and all that.
Yeah, yeah. But that's probably why we're seeing what we're seeing today, right? That they've taken out that sector of what kids were raised on in the public school for years. We had religion in school. I don't know if you did or not, but I know that I did for a few years there. So that sector was still there up until the 90s, and I guess it just dissipated.
Yeah. Now, to me, yeah, I can only speak for my area, but it's really making a comeback. When I was a school counselor, my principal was a Christian, and so he let me lead a Christian group. Of course, I knew some students who were Christians and went to them, hey, do you want to start a group? If you do, I can be your advisor, but you
Mm,
all have to, do most of the work. And so, yeah, so we had a group at our middle school, but my high school where my kids went, FCA is real big there, Fellowship of Christian Athletes,
mm.
and it's led by one of our local youth pastors, and that's pretty big. And so it's exciting to see a lot of that happening, coming back.
Sort of
You
like a
know,
rebirth, right? So that's
yeah,
good.
yeah, because I mean, just suicides. My our high school right before the pandemic, the month before, so it would have been what, February. We literally had 5 deaths in 1 month. We had an accidental overdose, and then what looks like either an overdose or a suicide, and
This
then
was
we had
during the pandemic. Is that what you're saying? Or
right before the pandemic. So in February, our high school, an overdose, suicide, uh, and then another suicide, and then we had 2 children murdered. It was a murder suicide
oh
by the
my god.
mom.
Oh my god.
If you can believe that, the mom killed the husband and then the 2 teenage boys, and then herself. And so these 5 deaths, that high school had in 1 month,
Hmm.
and it's like, so thankful. Our community came out. My church is right next to the high school. They did a bunch of stuff, and the principal, the school district was open to anything and everything. They're like, these kids need it's a huge high school, almost 2,000, and they were receptive to anything we could give them.
When you did when you did start the Christian group though, did you find kids would be like telling other friends, "Hey, come to this group with me. I know you may not believe yet, but come with me and see what this is about."
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And call it friendship and evangelism, especially for kids.
Sure.
They're, especially that age, they're bubbling ooze of insecurity,
Hmm.
and they don't want to do anything, risky, so they want to go with a friend. And so it's nice finding a little handful of, Christian kids that were friends that, wanted to take up the charge, and then, they would invite their friends, and then,
So cool.
you know, slowly, and I witnessed it up with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Then, like my son played football, and so he ended up being one of the leading the football team in prayers
Wow.
at practices and before and after games. And so it's just neat to see how, the school
Hmm.
uh, was receptive and open to, because they knew it was positive. They saw the changes in the kids that were getting involved with this group, that it was something positive. And, the kids were, whether they were Christian or not, were finding a connection. Uh,
And
you
here
know,
we have the CYA yeah, CYA, I think it is. They're the Christian athletes here too. So there's a
mhm,
strong presence there, and I love that. Um,
yeah.
Wayne, it's interesting we're talking about the birth of Christ and St. Nicholas today
Mhm.
because today is Transfiguration Sunday. So, what would you like, and what should people be hoping we can literally send God back up there with today? A message. I truly am feeling that question right now. So, what would you want us to send up with Jesus as he goes back up on Transfiguration Sunday?
Man, the first thing that comes to my mind, what I've been hearing the last 2 months, and forgive me, I'm no Bible scholar. I can't, I'm not one of those people who can pull scripture out of my head, but the one verse we've all been hearing is, repent and God will heal your land.
Mm.
Do you know what scripture that is? Do you know does it sound familiar?
It sounds somewhat familiar, but not
That was
entirely.
Wayne's very short paraphrase version of it, but that was my first thought is, we as a nation, especially as Christians, because I think Christians have really forfeited a lot of territory to Satan,
Ooh.
including education, politics, all kinds of different
Say
realms.
that one more time. I want that again because I love that statement.
That Christians forfeited a lot of territory to Satan, including politics, education, universities,
Mm.
and law enforcement,
I think
community service.
we've also forfeited humanity, don't you think?
How would you define that?
I would say I don't think we're humanizing every sector of the people in the world. We're not humanizing minorities. We're kind of using them as a pawn, one way or another. Unfortunately, we're not humanizing even white people because people forget that we have families too. Uh,
Yeah,
we're
and
not.
it's white privilege, and that's the form of racism as well. So yeah.
So we are not humanizing every sector, the immigrants too, and the cops.
Mhm.
So how can we start to truly humanize everybody and say, can we just stop this bloodshed and say we're all humans, we're all in this together?
Yeah, and I think that's where we as the Christians, to me, that's our job. We're the kingdom ambassadors. A lot of people, don't read the Lord's Prayer, but it's, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy
That
will
will
be
be
done
done.
on earth as it is in heaven. And so he's coming through us. So we should be bringing the kingdom. And the kingdom, what's the kingdom like? They're all singing praises up there and
Hmm.
full of joy, and there's no death and sickness and hate and all that. And so that's what we need to be allowing God to do through us, and be forces in the community and in our culture.
Mm,
Influence. We should be culture influencers, as far as
absolutely.
all that goes. Yeah.
Wayne, I love this and I love the self governance because, as I mentioned earlier, I feel like no one's being held responsible for their actions.
Hmm.
On the anarchist side of things, I mean, we're holding this cop accountable. We're holding him responsible for what he did. So why can't these people take it to hold themselves responsible and say, yeah, we messed this up in the way we reacted to it? We'll never see that, but we should. And our leaders also shouldn't, again, pawn off responsibility to just the way the cops handle it. They have to say, well, we don't like the protesters' way of handling it either, or the rioters' way of handling it either. So please keep talking about self governance because the more we do, the more we get through to people that way. I think we can make a bigger difference than what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So Wayne Vanderwall, I know you have a Facebook page, and so tell us about that and where people can get a hold of you.
Well, it's the Gospel of Santa Claus. .com, the gospel of Santa Claus.com, and there's a contact form on there. And actually, the woman I met this morning that works with all the wineries, marketing, she's my web person. So I'm actually having a WayneVanderwall.com website
Very
uh,
cool.
being built. So that should be done by July, because I have some other projects coming up. So I just thought it'd be time to have my own website, and then maybe I'll follow your mentorship and leadership as far as blogging and vlogging. I just learned that
Sure.
term this morning, vlogging.
Well, there you go. Well, if you ever need, if you want to ever talk about that, well, I'm game. I'm game to help you get this message out. So, thank you for doing it on my podcast today.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Alex. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
And I guess before we wrap up, one final message for those rioting, for those mourning, for those trying to figure out what the heck's going on in this country, your message on this Sunday.
Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah, yep.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell them.
No. Your message coming from you.
What's my message? Well, tomorrow is also Pentecost Sunday, when the Holy Spirit came down on Peter and some of the others, and just the power of the Holy Spirit just spread like wildfire, and 3,000 people were saved. And so, in light of that, I think the message for us is, there's hope, no matter how dismal. The Friday before Sunday, was depressing, but Sunday it led to something great. And I think that's what these times are kind of showing us, that regardless of how tough things are financially, relationally, work-wise, family-wise, whatever's going on with you, marriages, whatever strain that's been put on you during this time, put on all of us, that if we cling to Christ, as Christians, we have the Holy Spirit inside us, and that we just have to be open to it. I liken it to a light, like a lamp. A lamp can be plugged in, but it's not turned on to get the light. And there's a lot of Christians. I know I was a Christian at one time where I was plugged into the power of, this amazing force of power, but I wasn't turned on to it to receive it and let it flow through me. And so that's my message, is, to kind of reflect on where you're at with God spiritually and personally, and kind of have a little heart to heart with them, maybe do some repenting if that's something you need to do. And we do, we all, it should just be a regular practice of going through repentance, asking for forgiveness, and then just receiving it, knowing it's a promise. Receive that forgiveness, embrace it, and then just remember, He's just a loving Father. I just always envisioned the prodigal son and the dad coming out with the robe and throwing the robe around him and just giving him a hug, and that no matter how bad we screw up, he's there to embrace. Like when I was a kid, my dad was a Marine, and we got the belt, if we got out of line. So if my mom said, "Wait till your dad gets home," I'd be up in my room hiding. And but that's not our Heavenly Father. Our Heavenly Father is like, I know you screwed up. I saw it. I knew it was going to happen. But
He does see it coming more so than we do.
Don't hide. Yeah, He's like, come to me. Come to me. I'm going to comfort you, and I'll help you not screw up as bad next time,
No,
that's my message, is just cling to the hope and really embrace God, and all things. The Bible says all things work for the good of those who love God. So regardless of what's happening with us right now, it's all for good. If we love God, He's going to turn good out of it.
And you're right, it is Pentecost Sunday, but you know what? Transfiguration is later in the year. But even so, we should always send a prayer up to God one way or another. So
yeah. Amen.
Hey Wayne, thanks for joining, and please come back with updates you got on your projects.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I appreciate it, and always great talking to you.
Amen. Alex Garrett here has been another production of Alex Garrett Podcasting. We'll talk to you soon. Wayne, thank you so much. And by the way, you're like my third big guest in my new launch. I've just completely